Hey everybody, this is not room 8, this is the Jones residence because the high school shut down because of Ice Storm 2020 and we're just going to go with it, and this is my PowerPoint screen. So I'm going to try to do this particular video pretty fast for a couple reasons. One, the material, whatever. But two, I'm running out of battery, and so and I didn't bring the cord home. So here we go. We're gonna do this quick. Like I'm gonna do something quick. Yeah, I guess we'll find out. So stop talking. Move on. Press the button. All right. So this chapter is a lot of the culture of America and how it's changing over time. The last time we did one of these chapters, it was basically pre-Constitution. So these lessons are kind of interspersed within the book and how it goes. So we've got to get all this stuff out of the way so that when we get to the Civil War, we can just concentrate on Civil War stuff. All right, so westward movement. The newspapers are going to throw out these ideas of, hey, go west, yay, manifest destiny, and go out there and get you some land. And it's very romantic, talking about capital R, not lowercase r. So a romance is almost fictional, as a fictional belief of it's so wonderful, so wonderful. However, so for example, there are books here. Well, this is kind of awkward. Books here, The Last of the Mohicans, and the protagonist, Natty Bumppo. James Fenimore Cooper is going to write a series of these books, and people are going to go, oh, wow, the West, it's so great. I'm spending way too much time on this slide. I got to move on. However, we know that the West, people go out there, life is nasty, brutish, and short. Which of the philosophers said that? Was that Locke? Was that Rousseau? Was that Hobbes? Was that Montesquieu? Life is nasty, brutish, and short. It rhymes with, it starts with H. It rhymes with Hobbes. Okay, meanwhile, back in the cities, our cities are expanding. We're doubling in size every, 30 years? Oh no, sorry, wrong slide. I can't see it in this little thing right here. All right, so the rendezvous. Out there in the West, we have our fur traders and our explorers who are going out there, and there are no big cities out there yet. I mean, Denver doesn't exist yet, so although it's getting there. So these explorers, they would have these rendezvous, which is French for let's get together, out there. And from the years 1825 to 1840, they actually had like an annual rendezvous of traders going out there and meeting with Native Americans and getting all together. And so there you go. Meanwhile, back in the cities, there you go, we're doubling population every 25 years, and we're going to add states. We're going to keep adding states because of how the Northwest the Northwest Ordinance allows us to do that. And so in 1860, so the year right there when we elect President Lincoln and when the Civil War is about to kick off, we're going to have 33 states. The problem is when you add states, you add population, you're doubling population, doubling and doubling and doubling. Well, the more people you have, the more trash you have, the more sanitation issues you have, the more disease issues that you have. And we haven't figured out penicillin yet, so we got to figure we got to figure this stuff out. We also have a lot of immigration coming in. The Europeans, if we're talking about mid-19th century, right, the mid-1800s, Europe is Europe, and so a lot of people are coming over here trying to get out of their desperate situation from that continent. Coming over here for a better life. What is it? The American dream, right? So let's talk about a couple of these groups. The Irish are going to have a situation in the 1840s. Of course, we know that their major food staple is the potato, and there was some sort of nasty little disease that struck the potato crops in the 1840s. They call it the black rot, the black 40s, the potato rot. Yucky. And so a lot of Irish people basically lost everything. And so there was no reason to stay. And so they jumped on boats and they came over here to the United States. Well, good for them. They're going to have the American dream. The problem is that they're going to come over here basically as destitutes, which means poorer than poor. And so where are we going to put the poorer than the poor, right? New York City can only handle so many people. They're also going to introduce a big wave of Catholicism. The vast, like 99% of the Irish at that time were Catholic. And so if you recall from 8 videos ago, we didn't have many Catholic colonies, just Maryland, right? And so a big wave of Catholics are going to come over here, and the Catholics are going to vote in a bloc, a very powerful political bloc, because they tend to vote all the same way. Much like here in the year 2020, in fact, here in just a couple of days, we're going to have a presidential election, which by the time you see this, we might actually, who knows if we're going to know, but trying to get the Catholic vote. And so how do you get the Catholic vote in the year 2020? Well, you go after the abortion issue, right? More on that later, especially next year when we get to AP government. All right. The Germans are going to come over here. We're going to call them the 48ers. The 48ers, see, get it, the 48ers. The Germans. So the Germans are a little different. They're going to come over. They're not Catholic. They're Protestant. So they're going to fit in the North much easier than the Catholics, the Irish. The Irish are going to actually refuse to go to some of the Protestant schools. They're going to form their own schools, like, for example, Notre Dame. The Germans are going to come over here. The difference between the Germans and the Irish, besides the religious denominations, is that the Germans come over here with a plan. They're going to pack up their houses. They're going to pack up their goods and their stuff, and they're going to come over here with a plan. And so they're going to avoid the East Coast, and they're going to go across the what do we call those, the Great Lakes, and we're going to hole up in places like Wisconsin and Minnesota. And so they're going to form their own German communities there. And so there you go. And there you go. Germans. It says Germans are more educated than Americans. And Germans are anti-slavery, and they form communities in, it says, Wisconsin. All right. So we've always had, again, we have the United States of America, bring us your poor, you're tired, you're wanting to be free. It's somewhere on the Statue of Liberty. But we do have our detractors, people who do not want immigrants coming over here and messing with us, Americans. And so we have a new political party formed. It's called the Know Nothing. I can't even make this stuff up. The Know Nothing Party. So the reason they call it the Know Nothing Party, well, a lot of different stories, but the short version is that if you say, well, what does your party stand for? We know nothing, I know nothing. Right, because they don't actually want to say, we hate immigrants. But that's the point. They hated immigrants, and so they were basically the anti-immigrant party. Let's see, anti-Catholic. They wanted to ban Catholics. They wanted to, so we're specifically talking about the Irish, and make citizenship with 21 years requirement. Ooh, to vote, you got to be here for 21 years. You see how that works? You see how they're trying to fix the vote? Thank goodness we're not doing that in the year 2020. Riots and attacks between nativists. So the word nativist means somebody who was an immigrant just 150 years before, and the current immigrants. And the interesting flag, Native Americans, beware of foreign influence. And they've got the backward ends, like the Russians. I don't know. Weird. Okay. So we have, if you recall from AP World or your World History class, Watt is going to invent the steam engine, and it's going to, go gangbusters. Well, sure. Not over here in the United States, though. Not yet. So it was invented over there in England, and England's going to take the steam engine. It's going to really rev up the factories over there, specifically the textile factories. And we are not going to have that. We don't have the technological ability to do this yet until that's right. Samuel Slater, quote, the father of the factory system in America. He gets that name. The father of the factory system How did he become the father? Well, he stole the blueprints of the factory up in over there in England, and committed them to memory, and then came over here and drew them out. And so, yeah, we stole the idea for a steam engine factory. And good news for us now then is that now that we have steam engine factories over here, then we can start having our own textile factories, and we can start making big cloth, and we can start making some money. All right. If you have factories and they're there to make textiles and cloth and clothes and all this wonderful stuff and sailing ships, etc., etc. Well, you got to get the fiber from somewhere. Yes. So cotton, right? Okay. So cotton. How do you want to say this? Cotton was the major crop down in the South at this point. And obviously it was very slave intensive, because cotton, holy smoke, my great grandmother literally was a cotton picker back in the teens and the 20s, and she took us out at one point out here in rural Oklahoma, and she had us go out into a cotton field and she just showed us how to pick cotton, and the bowls of the cotton, you put your finger in there and you pull the cotton out. I mean, gosh, it would get inside your cuticle, and then you start bleeding, and then you got blood all over the cotton, and it's just crazy stuff. And yes, that's very labor intensive, but perhaps what's even more labor intensive when it comes to the cotton industry is cleaning the cotton. And so cleaning the cotton involves taking the bowl of cotton and then pulling the seeds out. And it is just mind-numbing. There you go. Can you make that as an adjective? Sure you can. Pulling the little seeds out, and just over and over. And we're talking about hours and hours and hours and hours of work to fill maybe, the size of a cup of Coke. Just crazy how much labor intensive it is to pull the seeds out. And then this guy, Eli Whitney, he's going to invent the cotton gin. Cotton gin is a very simple device. You put the cotton in the top, and there's some combs inside there that basically pull the fiber away from the seeds, and the seeds kind of drop out, and there you go. And so Eli Whitney, he's on record saying, well, I'm hoping that this machine, basically, Eli Whitney is an abolitionist. He was not pro-slavery. And so he was like, I'm building this machine so that we don't have to worry about slaves anymore, because this one machine can do the work of 50 slaves. Okay, yes, that's true. Here's the problem with that. That one machine can do the work of 50 slaves, which means that it can pull seeds so much faster, which means you need more cotton to put into the machine, which means you need to sow more fields of cotton to keep up with this machine. And if you need to sow more fields of cotton, you have to have more slaves to do that. So the argument is that Eli Whitney's machine may have actually caused slavery to get worse. I don't know. That's just poor guy. Kind of like, no, I don't have time. Yeah, I do. What was it? The guillotine, right? Dr. Guillotin. I'm going to make something so crazily fast that nobody's ever going to want to watch the guy's head come off, and then chop, and then people are like, dude, do that again. That was cool. And it turned out that the death penalty was even better afterwards. And Dr. Guillotin was like, dang it, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, I spent too much time on this. Moving on. All right, so Eli Whitney, he gets the credit for the cotton gin, but another thing that he was famous for, not as famous for, was the idea of the interchangeable parts. So you can manufacture parts, for example, of a gun, and then when the parts wear out, you just put the parts in. You don't have to buy the entire gun anymore. I know you're sitting here thinking, right? Yes, right, but somebody had to come up with that idea, and that was Eli Whitney. And so one of the first manufacturing products that came out of that was, well, obviously guns. And so here we have a diagram of a gun and all the different pieces of a gun. In fact, I think that's the Samuel Colt Peacemaker. Sounds like a good name for a gun, the Peacemaker. But then let's see, other things that happened in manufacturing. We had the sewing machine in 1846, and now that we have sewing machines, now the everyday person can go out there and sew their own clothes much faster than. I don't know. I can't sew clothes, so I can put a button on jeans, but that's about it. I don't have time to talk about this. My little light's blinking. Samuel Morse invents the I just told you to do your homework on Morse code. And the limited liability laws, whatever you put in is the only thing that you're, if the company falls apart, then you're only responsible for the money that you put in, not for other people. So that's a limited liability. Okay, so now that we have factories, people can now go work in factories, which are not necessarily family-run factories, right? Before factories here in the United States, people basically worked in their own little groups, their own little families, and so maybe in their neighborhoods. But now you can go work for the big man, right? The big boss. And so we're moving manufacturing away from the family unit and making it into like what we would think today is real world. Well, the good news of bad news, right? Bad news is that we're getting away from family values. And so the families are going to start getting farther apart with regard to their relationships because dad has to go work for 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day at the factory, and sometimes maybe even sleep at the factory, etc., etc. President Van Buren, actually, in 1840, he's going to establish the National 10-Hour Day. Ooh, 10-hour day. I guess that's not too bad. I'm usually at school for at least 10 hours. But anyway, and then let's see the other thing on here. 1820s, children workers. We didn't have the rules against children working yet. We're going to get there. And then workers were forbidden to form unions. Yes and no. They were forbidden to form unions to force better, more pay, but the Supreme Court of the United States said you can form a union as long as it's not violent. We'll get there. Women in the economy. All right, so yeah, women are going to have a bigger impact in the economy now that people are going to have sewing machines and textiles are going to come to the front, and we're going to start making some big money with cloth and manufacturing and that kind of stuff. However, when it comes to the political process and or anything like that, women are definitely still here in the United States, not definitely then in the United States, second-class citizens. I mean, I was about to say today. No, I don't. I mean, how many women are in the House of Representatives? How many women are on the Supreme Court? How many, right? I mean, we're still kind of dealing with that. But, so this is an interesting little thing. It's called the cult of domesticity. The cult of domestic. The idea that the true job of a woman should be that she keeps a clean house, and that she, when the father walks through the door, and then she's like, "Hey, honey, how was your day? And let me get your slippers, and here's a pipe to smoke, and tell me about your day while I fix you your food." And that's the perfect woman according to the cult of domesticity. Obviously, we're going to have some females who are going to reject this idea. There you go. Hey, also, Catherine Beecher, she's going to be, I think we're going to read some stuff of hers. Catherine Beecher is going to put out this interesting idea. Women shouldn't just, be cooks and clean the house and or sew clothes and or milk the cows or whatever. Women can also be teachers, especially for elementary schools. Up to this point, basically all teachers were male, even like in first grade. And so maybe women should be teachers. And if you think to yourself, wow, in your elementary years, how many of your teachers were female versus how many were male? Compared to your high school, well, I was going to say and your college, but there you go. All right. Catherine Beecher, she's the one that kicked that off. Indiana, Illinois, we're going to make a lot of we're going to have a lot of wheat. We're going to domesticate wheat, and we're going to make a lot of food off that. Corn, corn is going to be big because one, corn. I mean, you can grow a lot of corn really fast in Iowa and or other places here in the Midwest. And you can feed a lot of pigs, a lot of hogs with corn. You can also turn corn into alcohol. Moving on. John Deere. John Deere has his steel plow, and now instead of having the iron plows that they tried earlier on, now that we have the steel plow with the Bessemer process, the steel plow can handle the hard soil of Kansas, Oklahoma, etc., Texas. Cyrus McCormick invents the reaper and kind of shows there and cuts the grass, or cuts the wheat, cuts the cereal, cuts the grain, and binds it up, and there you go. Governor DeWitt Clinton. Governor DeWitt Clinton of New York in 1825, he's going to come up, well, I don't know if he came up with the idea, but he's going to get credit for starting to build the canal, the Erie Canal. So the Erie Canal is going to connect the Lake Erie, surprisingly enough, Erie Canal, the Lake Erie with the Hudson River. Let's see, all the way to the Hudson River. And so that means that any boat that wants to go from, say, from Charleston, or for that matter, New York, and wants to go over to Chicago, instead of going the long way all the way around, let's see, that'd be Newfoundland and Canada, and then coming back all the way down through the St. Lawrence Seaway, and coming down through all the different lakes. Now they just cut right across, and there you go. And so, American ingenuity. The railroad. Okay, this is a big deal. Just not for this chapter. The Iron Horse, right? The Iron Horse moniker given by the Native Americans. They called it the Iron Horse. The most significant contribution to westward expansion. So it started here in 1828. They had it over in England before they came over here. Steam engine, that kind of stuff. It's going to come over here. We're going to start establishing things like the width of the rails and things like that. The railroad. Muy importante. We're just going to talk about a lot of this as we get to the Civil War. And kind of a precursor here. The West grew livestock and grain. The South raised cotton. The East and North made machines and textiles. But everything was connected by the railroads. And if you look at this map here, you see that there's a ton of railroad tracks up here in the north, and not as much in the south. And I wonder if that's going to come back and bite the South when it comes to the Civil War. No, I don't wonder. I know. You could probably guess too. Moving on. Okay, hey, we're halfway. I still have some battery. Okay, we're good. Reviving religion. Last time we talked about religion, we're talking about the Great Awakening. Jonathan Edwards and sinners in the hands of an angry God. So the idea of with all the tents and having revivals. Well, now we're going to have the Second Great Awakening. And the Second Great Awakening really is going to target the women. So the Second Great Awakening is going to push for women they are the moral force, right? The moral force of the family unit. If you think about, and I'm not saying your family or my family or any of your friends' families are like this, but who's the one that makes you go to church, right? Is it your grandpa or is it your grandma? Is it your dad or is it your mom? Which, right? The vast majority of you out there are like, oh yeah, my dad would rather stay home and watch football, but my mom says, we're going to church. Put on a nice clean outfit. And of course grandma, right? So this is what comes out of this. All right, so let's talk a little bit about deism. Deism is a very simple idea. It's Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine and Benjamin Franklin to an extent was a deist. Deism is the belief that God created the heavens and the earth, and then when he was done, he said, okay, have a good time. And now God just sits back and watches us, doesn't interact with us at all. And so a deist belief would be that Jesus was a really good person, but Jesus can't call on God because God doesn't, you know, do doesn't interact. So it's a deist belief. And then we have a group of another group coming out, the Unitarians. So you think about unity. The Unitarians belief that there's not the God, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It's just God, and everything else is wrapped up inside God. So it's Unitarian, and so this is going to conflict with the all the Trinitarians, right? The Methodists and the Baptists and the Episcopalians and the Catholics and the Lutherans and the Anglicans, etc., etc. Okay. In the South, we're going to have the Methodists and the Baptists are going to really grow rapidly. See in our chart there, you've got the blue and the green. The blue are the Methodists and the green are the Baptists. And as you go up to 1860, they're going to explode. The Catholics not so much. In fact, Catholics just a little bit of increase. Congregationalists, the Episcopalians, the Lutherans, but religion is continuing to take a hold, but more so in the South than the North. And, yeah, you guessed it, some churches supported slavery, and some churches did not support slavery. Okay, so a new religion, we have Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith in 1830. He's going to found the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We call the people who are members of that church, we call them the Mormons. The story says, according to the Book of Mormon, that Joseph Smith was out there minding his own business out there in New York and ran across the angel Moroni. I'm giving you the very short version here. Ran across the angel Moroni right there, and Moroni gave him these golden plates and these glasses, these magical glasses that could read the plates. And the text was talked about how Jesus actually has come back the second time. He appeared to the Native Americans over here in North America, and so Joseph Smith founded his own religion there. The problem is that when you start a brand new religion in 1830, all the other religions that have been around, since for the past 2,000 years, the Catholics, etc., they're not going to take kindly to the new kid on the block, and they're going to keep kicking the Mormons out further and further and further west. Ultimately, Joseph Smith is going to be killed for his beliefs, and also the Mormons, they had a really bad time. The Mormons are going to eventually, under the leadership of Brigham Young, they're going to find their way all the way to Utah, and where Brigham Young is going to try to start his own state, the state of Deseret. And there you go. And so today we call Utah the Mormon state, like Oklahoma's the Sooner state, Texas is whatever, Texas. But the Mormon state, Abraham Lincoln's going to get involved in this because he wants it to be a Republican state, but then he can't have it as a state because the Mormons at that time were polygamists, and so they're going to have to iron out some deals with regard to outlawing polygamy, and we'll get to that later. Okay, so the Mormons. That's Joseph Smith, that's Brigham Young. Those are the plates. And you can go see copies of the plates in Salt Lake City today. All right, tax-supported schools. Yeah, why not? Because why? Because I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. What's the next part of that? Anyway, moving on. And so, again, if we have the women who are going to come and take over a lot of the elementary roles, the elementary school teaching roles, and let the men basically remain in the universities, in the high schools and universities level. Okay, free public schools are far and wide because you got to pay for them somehow. So there you go. Female universities. So up to this point, females have not been. I mean, females have been allowed to go to elementary school. Some females were allowed to go to middle school and high school, but not so much. Remember, the cult of domesticity says really women just need to know how to clean and cook, and that's basically it. But we are going to have these ladies who are going to push for, and good for them, right? They're going to push for higher education for females. And so here we have Emma Willard. I got that right. 1820s. Emma Willard is going to push for a female university at Troy in New York. Willard Hall at Oklahoma State is the education building named after Emma. Okay. Jefferson founds the University of Virginia, and the first state-supported universities show up in the South in 1795. Before this, they were all private universities, right? Like Harvard and Yale and Dartmouth, they were all private up to this point, and then they're all going to start changing later. All right. Okay, so women are going to really, Second Great Awakening says that they are the moral leaders of the family, so they're going to start taking on these projects. So, for example, Dorothea Dix, she's going to take on reform in the prisons. Dorothea is going to go to a couple of insane asylums, and she's going to see the treatment of these people inside the asylums. And I pause there because I'm reflecting on some of her words. Feel free to look up her diaries, her journals, where she talks very candidly about what was going on in some of these insane asylums, and just we're talking about like horror movie kind of stuff that they're doing to these prisoners. Here's a pretty famous drawing of how you handle the popular mode of curing insanity. And so here we have the little girl or the lady here is insane. So you have the first one, she's about to beat her with a rock. You beat her head against against the floor. You dunk her, you hang her up. Popular methods of curing insanity. So Dorothea Dix, she went to Congress, the National Congress, and said, "Hey, no, you guys don't believe. We have to change these rules. We have to make rules first." And a lot of the Congress people said, "No, we don't believe you." And so she said, "Come with me." And so she took a couple, and then they realized just how awful it was. Okay, so that's the insane asylum. So we also had the penitentiaries were not much better. So the prison system, the penal system. And so different states started realizing that, prison can be used not just for punishment, but it can be used for reform. And so that way that we don't have recidivism, which means that a prisoner gets out and then comes right back in because they committed another crime, because they're not being reformed. They're also going to reduce, starting here in the 1800s, they're going to start reducing the number of crimes that are capital punishment, death penalty. So there you go. If you recall from 7, 8, 10, 12 videos ago, we were talking about all the different ways you can get the death penalty, especially in Massachusetts Bay Colony. If you just, say one nasty word about God, there goes your head. Actually, I guess you'd be hanged, but there you go. Okay. Oh, and debtors' prisons. We're going to start getting rid of debtors' prisons. The idea that if you can't pay your debt, we're going to throw you in jail until you can pay your debt. Somebody finally said, "Then how are you?" Right. Alcohol. Again, the women, the moral fabric of our society, the women are going to get involved in anti-alcohol stuff. So here we have alcoholism in the 1800s obviously was rampant. Because, what else was there to do? We didn't have football yet, we didn't have baseball yet, we didn't have soccer yet, we didn't have video games yet, we didn't have the internet yet. So what are you going to do? You're going to drink. Okay, so and this is going to cause a lot of people to So the clergy, women, members of Congress are going to get together and they're going to start trying to figure out how can we beat this evil demon rum. So the word is temperance, which means no alcohol. So the temperance society is going to be established. Oh, it says right there, look at that. In 1826, drinking tears apart families, reduces working efficiency, and drinking is from the devil. And in 1851, the state of Maine bans alcohol. And you're thinking, how can they do that? Oh man, Maine, you banned alcohol? Now you guys realize that it was 1918? In 1918, we passed a constitutional amendment that said no alcohol in the United States of America. We'll get to that more later, but it was illegal to have, purchase, possess, create, transport alcohol in the United States, according to the Constitution of the United States. That was an exciting time. All right. Again, women that couldn't vote. And so they're trying to pass all these laws, and alcohol and prison reform and insane asylum reform and et cetera, but women can't vote yet in national elections, and not many states at this point either. Women gave up property rights when they were married, and women basically stayed at home, right, and raised their kids. But this isn't working for them. We have a group of these three ladies here. So we have Lucretia Mott, Susan B. Anthony, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Cady rhymes with lady. These three ladies are going to become pretty rebellious when it comes to politics. Susan B. Anthony, she's probably the one you've heard of, right? Because the Susan B. Anthony dollar. But the other two, Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they're going to go over to England. Where in 1848, it might have been 47 when they went. They went over to England, over to London, where they had the National Women's Conference. In London. The crazy thing about the National Women's Conferences in London was that women were not allowed to go to the conference. It was all just a bunch of men talking about women's issues. And Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott were at the front door, and they're like, hi, we're here from the United States. And they're like, yeah, we're not letting you in because, you're female and, you can't make your own decisions about your own self. So, right. So these two ladies, they got so fired up, they came back over here to the United States, and in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848, they're going to have the Seneca Falls Convention. And there's a group of ladies there, and a couple of guys there too. And they are going to write their own Declaration of Independence. And in fact, what they do is that they steal, they plagiarize Thomas Jefferson. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by and so they basically take the Declaration of Independence and they rewrite, they tweak it, and instead of towards that third part where it talks about King George has done this and has done this and done this, what they do is that they say, and men have done this to us and they've done this and they don't respect us because of this, and it's a pretty powerful document. Maybe we should do that for readings. Okay. Note to self, got to do that. All right. Hey, we're almost done. I think I'm going to make it on my battery. All right, excellent. Utopia. In 1516, the book Utopia came out, written by Thomas More. A utopia, if you look at the definition, it's like the perfect place. Like the Garden of Eden is considered the perfect utopia. Everything falls into place. Everything is wonderful. There's butterflies and hummingbirds and rainbows and unicorns. So that's utopia, right? Okay, well, obviously that doesn't work in real life. On State of Nature Island, it does not work. But if you get a couple of people who say, you know what, if you had the right people, maybe you could have a utopia. If you have the right people, the right number of people, the people who have the right thinking, then they can go off into the wilderness away from all the other crazies and they can form their own utopia. And so in the 1800s, this became a thing, to see if they could establish, to see if different groups of people could establish the perfect society. And so we have a couple pretty famous ones. Robert Owen is going to establish New Harmony in Indiana in 1825, and it's going to go for a couple years, and no, it's going to fall apart. And New Harmony here, and I think this is New Harmony's the maze out there, but the other one is Oneida, and so the other big one that we're going to talk about here for a second. All right. Oneida, New York. John Humphrey Noyes, so he's going to get a group of people together and he's going to say, we're going to establish this perfect society. And you look at the bylaws, and I think I have those in your readings this week, and so we looked at some. You're going to read some of those and talk, and we'll discuss those later. But it looks good on paper. One of his rules was, if you are married, when you walk through the front door and you become a member of our utopian society of Oneida, you are no longer married to the person that you were married to. You are now married to everybody in the community. So if there are 100 people there, 50 guys and 50 girls, everybody's married to one another, which means that, how do you say this? There is some jealousy when it comes to who's spending time with who, and at some point, Noyes, he starts making rules, some eugenics type rules that say, hey, all the pretty people, we sure would like you guys to have the kids. And so the pretty people, and then he basically, made lists and said, you're one of the pretty people, and you're part of the uggos. And so pretty people, we're going to establish times and dates for you guys to procreate. And there you go. Jealousy is going to bring this community apart. It's going to tear it apart. Well, jealousy, and then also John Humphreys Noyes is going to attempt to procreate with females who are not of age. What do we call that? Oh, we had child molestation. So the utopian communities that were in the 1800s, they lasted for a couple of years, and then ultimately they're going to fall apart. And again, State of Nature Island, are we rational people? Are we, right? Although interestingly enough, Oneida is still kind of with us. Once the whole thing fell apart and people started to remarry individuals, they became silversmiths up there, and so they became. I'd like to think that they are the preeminent at that time, the preeminent silverware maker. And so today, if you go to not necessarily your silverware drawer, but your grandma or your great-grandma's silverware drawer, and you pull out a knife or a fork or a spoon, you turn it over, and it tells you the company. If it says Oneida, well, it's from this place. Very popular. Moving on. Oh, here's our last slide. Okay. Up to the year of 1812, 1813, 1814, we didn't really have a lot of literature here. Oh no, we got one more slide after this. We didn't have a lot of American literature. But then after that, we had the era of good feelings, right, with Monroe, President Monroe, and so people with time on their hands were not at war, so people are going to start writing books. And so we have some American authors who are going to come to the forefront. And you may know some of these. Let's see. James Fenimore Cooper, he's going to be the author. this was the very beginning of this video, of the Natty Bumppo books, The Last of the Mohicans. Excuse me. Books. They're the Deerslayer books, and so that show the romantic life of the West. Washington Irving, you know him as the guy who wrote the the story of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow with Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman. Edgar Allan Poe, you may have heard of this guy. He wrote a couple of books. He was more in touch with his dark side than others. In fact, there's a picture of Poe. There's Poe right there. And so, his famous ones include The Telltale Heart. Everybody's read that, I think. The Cask of Amontillado. Well, that's a good one. Oh no, Fortunato. Moving on. The Pit and the Pendulum, and then obviously The Raven. Nevermore, Nevermore. Oh man, we should have totally done that last week because of Halloween. Nope, I don't have time. I do. No, I don't have time. No, I don't have to stop. Okay, moving on. Herman Melville. Herman Melville's going to write, let's see, Taipei and Umu and Billy Budd. And those are pretty famous in their own little, but he's going to write this little book called Moby Dick. Remind me to tell you the trick on how to get through that book. Okay, so Moby Dick. All right. And then Nathaniel Hawthorne is going to write The Scarlet Letter about, April, about Hester Prynne and her kid Pearl, and she has to wear the giant A on her clothes because of being an adulteress. And then his other pretty famous book is The House of the Seven Gables. We can talk about that later on Zoom. And then I have here at the bottom I have Harriet Beecher Stowe. Harriet Beecher Stowe is going to write. She's going to write this little book called Uncle Tom's Cabin, and it's going to make some noise. More on that later. Last slide, right? Okay, last slide. Transcendentalism. Ooh, there's a big word. TM. Transcendentalism. The idea that we are all one part of nature, that nature is us and we are nature. And I'm going to try not to make fun of transcendentalists, but tree huggers. The idea that human society is basically evil, and we need to go out there and we need to be more natural. And so we've got a couple of guys who are going to be utopians, who are going to push transcendentalism. So we've got Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau are probably the two most famous ones. Emerson's going to write The American Scholar, and he's basically going to say, we need to stop thinking like Europe. We need to start thinking American and American beliefs and not European crazy stuff. And so interesting ideas that he writes. Henry David Thoreau is going to write a book called Walden. And so what he does is he goes out to this pond, Walden, I can't get my finger on it, Walden Pond right there, out there in Massachusetts, isn't it? I've been there. You'd think I'd know what state it's in. Yeah, it's over there by Concord and Lexington, right? Anyway, somewhere out there. I've got a great story about Walden Pond, maybe on Zoom. No, I'm going to tell it here. Wait, do I have time? Oh, it's going to be close. Quit talking, just say it. But he's going to go out to Walden Pond. He's going to build himself a little cabin about the size of a small bedroom in a house. And he's going to live out there for a couple of years, and he's going to write about his oneness with nature. And there you go. No, I don't have time to tell you the story of Walden Pond, but we'll get there on Zoom. It's going to be exciting. All right. That's it. Okay, this week. Oh. My face changes different colors because of the light. How that works. Okay. This week, there you go. Next week, we're going to start kicking off with all the crazy stuff as the Civil War approaches. Okay, guys. I hope you have electricity right now. I know some of you don't. I hope you get it back soon. Be good. I'll see you later.